All right, Shalom. I want to start out by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Shemi Abashai, by Sharon Kakwadash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. And Shalom to the Akim out there pushing the word of sincerity and the truth. Yeah, and I just want to go into this article. Goes into basically the Caucasians written in the book of Quran. Now, when you read this article, it's on the RastafariSpeaks.com. It's a lot of inconsistencies located in this text pertaining to Adam and Eve. Pertaining to history, they speak about how Adam and Eve were cursed for basically coming against the Egyptians, and they were pushed out from the Holy Land to the Caucasus regions, which that's untrue. You know, they were pushed out. You know, it said they set cherubims on the outside of Eden so because they didn't have pathway due to them breaking the law, statutes, and commandments in the form of philosophy, which was the apple, so to speak, which people say, which really goes into the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They were to be pure and holy, and they didn't do so, so they went off. But I really want to mainly highlight this one text going into the people of the mountain in verse 93 of this in this book of the Quran. I'll go into the more accurate details in this next article, but I'm just going to jump to the point. It says, in the surah, a chapter called Al-Kahf, or the cave, right, that's it, Al-Kahf in the surah. It says, until we came to the rising of the Un, he found it rising on a people for whom he provided no covering protection against the sun. And who's those people that have no covering protection against the sun? The Idumean race, all right, or the Edomites, or the so-called white men. That's the race of people that when the UV lights or the ultraviolet lights of the sun actually sprinkles on their skin or concentrates on themselves, they receive skin diseases. All right, melanoma, different skin cancer is a byproduct of them actually being in the sun for too long. All right, that's why they have to use skin treatments and protections due to the intense heat that the sun pushes out to that race of people. It says, until he reached a tract between two mountains, he found beneath them a people who scarcely understood a word. And that people that scarcely understood a word are the Idumeans or the Edomites. It tells you in Job, the 30th chapter, how those specific people, they braid. The word braid goes into basically hard grunts. There was grunting back and forth. And that's talking about the Edomites. And even when you deal with the the Slavs, through the Spirit, I was, going into the Slavs earlier. Lord, and I'll, maybe possibly do a second lesson on it. But you had a lot of historians that spoke about how the Slavs were basically animalistic people too. They were basically barbaric, and their language was developed in latter history from a mixture of, common languages, and that's how their religions came about also. But they also were very beastly, so to speak. But it says, but wait, this verse tells us who they are. They said, Ol Zakarnan, the Gog and Magog, do great mischief on earth. Do you remember who the Gog and Magog people of the Bible were and what regions that represented? Okay, Idris sisters, did you ever hear that there was a wall erected and built a long time ago around the Caucasus Mountains area? For what reason, I don't know, but I guess you can tell me. But in the Quran, it says in verse 95, help me, therefore with strength, I will erect a strong barrier between you and them. Verse 96, at length, when he had filled the spaces between the two steep mountainsides, he said, blow with your bellows, that he made it red as fire. He said, bring me that I may pour over it molten lead. This whole chapter is dedicated to tell us about that, right? And that part is true, about the individuals that built protectionary barriers around the Caucasus regions. And when you go into it, that text goes into the gates of Alexander. The gates of Alexander, and he built those gates in the Caucasus regions. And that shows you really that's the spirit of these Edomites, man. They always dealt with the Caucasus Mountains as a stronghold for many years. All right, and I'm gonna get that to prove that this is under the wall, which I just read of in that text. I'm gonna go into this on Wikipedia on the Dual Car 9. It says, finally, the Surah mentions in verse 93 to 98 a man who traveled a great deal and reached the east and the west of the earth. The Quran represents the Syrian legend of a great king who helped a tribe of people build a massive wall of iron between two mountains. Right, and when you go into this, it's going to Al-Kahf, what I was talking about earlier, dealing with the mountain regions of the people of the cave. Matter of fact, I'm going to read this and I'm going to jump back to the point. But it says, verse 9 to 26 of the chapter retells the Christian folktale of the people of the cave. A few young believers lived in a time when they were tortured for their beliefs upon the guidance of God. They fled the city where believers were persecuted together with the Kalab, which is dog, and took refuge in a cave where they fell asleep when they found themselves that the people of the city had become believers. But I want to jump down to that point, of the people of the cave in this verse. It says, the wall may have reflected a distant knowledge of the Great Wall of China. 12th century scholar Al-Idrisi drew a map of Roger of Sicily showing the land of Gog and Magog in Mongolia, or various Sassanid Persian walls built in the Caspian area against the northern barbarians, or a conflation of the two. It was also likely inspired by a story from the Alexander Romance, where Alexander the Great supposedly built a great wall in the Caucasus to keep out barbarians. Right, so Alexander the Great, he used the stronghold of the Caucasus to keep out barbarians. And those barbarians, when you deal with the barbs or barbarians, that was a term that the Romans used heavily to reference individuals that didn't follow their ancient practices. All right, and those barbarians specifically is talking about was Gog and Magog during the gates of Alexander. And this is just historical context, according to scholars and things of that nature. That's why I'm through the spirit, I'm gonna just put question marks and see what brothers actually think, because this could seem like possible speculation of the text, but it makes sense. It makes a hell of a lot of sense. Like I said, these individuals that wrote these different books, they knew who the white race were. They didn't, per se say they were Idumeans, but during that time, the concentrated history of the white race was more potent. It was more concentrated. It was more easily to apprehend and see who these people were. They were different. They had different mannerisms, that is written in Genesis 25. They had different customs and styles of life, and all texts agree that these people were basically, sadistic. That's why you have all kind of different books that go into the so-called white race, and they all speak about how they're, devilish people. It's not just Israelites that preach that, or we just come out and speak ill about the Edomites or the Europeans. Today they're known as Europeans, but we know them as Edomites. But it's a lot of individuals through texts that wrote about this specific race of people and how they were to be to cause havoc and detriment to the world. But this is under the gates of Alexander. The gates of Alexander was a legendary barrier supposedly built by Alexander the Great in the Caucasus to keep the uncivilized barbarians of the north, typically associated with Gog and Magog, from invading the land of the south. The gates were a popular subject in medieval travel literature, starting with the Alexander Romance and a version from perhaps the 7th century. And that's heavy context, because even when you deal with Alexander, he knew that he was the leopard in the book of Daniel, which would be that Greek kingdom. And those Greeks were Edomites. They was the ones that recreated history, and they changed the names of majority of those lands because they knew they was Edomites. You could even go into the Alexander the Great, and you could go through his lineage, and you could see how he goes all the way back to was that Haman the Agagite, which Haman was the son of Agag, and Agag was an Amalekite, and Amalek was the grandson of Edom. So Alexander knew his lineage, all right, and they recreated the lineages and the lives or the heritages and lands of the masses of the people so that they could change the perspectives of history. And that's why you have the great library of Alexandria, Egypt, where they house and hoarded a lot of information, and they actually made it where individuals wasn't able to actually receive and read a lot of that information because they were taking down nations and they were smothering them from their history. But I'm gonna continue on. It says the wall, also known as the Caspian Gates, which the Caspian Gates, you have the Black and you have the Caspian Sea, which is bordered around the Caucasus region. It says has been identified with two locations: the pass of Durban, Russia, or with the pass of Dario, west of the Caspian Sea. Tradition also connects it to the Great Wall of Gorgon on the southeastern shore. And basically, they set up the defense lines against Gog and Magog. So it says historically, these fortifications were part of the defense lines built by Sasanians of Persia. The Great Wall of Gorgon may have been built by the Parthians. And, brothers could go into the geographical identifications and all that, which you see. This is the Caucasus regions. And that's what was built by Alexander. And this isn't even spoken much in history, because the more you get into Esau and you get into his history, the more you can see without a shadow of a doubt that they are the Idumean race. These Caucasians, they fit the prophecy perfectly in the scriptures. I'm just going to read this little bit, and I'm going to, jump to the some other points. It says the gates of Alexander are most commonly identified with the Caspian gates of Durban, whose 30 north-looking towers used to stretch for 40 kilometers between the Caspian Sea and the Caucasus Mountains, effectively blocking the passage across the Caucasus. And here's the Caspian gates of Durban. It says Russia are often identified with the gates of Alexander. And this is historical. This is the gate right here. And you can see this is a very high, strong, fortified gate built by the Caspian, as also known as the Caspian Gates, built by the Caspian Sea. And it's housed in the residence of the Idumeans, which is what the Caucasus regions, and that's why they say that history started with the Greeks, because the Greeks used the Caucasus regions of the Black and Caspian Sea as a major stronghold. All right, just like even with Rome, the Romans actually used Petra. They used Petra as a major stronghold because those in today's time would be like city-states, major strongholds, or major state lines that they would use to keep as barricaded protections from people to go out, or areas for blockage or trade routes and things of that nature. So these cities were very, very popular and important in that time. And I wanted to go into the prophecy of them actually dwelling in the caves, because the original caveman is the Edomites, Esau. All right, and it tells you that, and also in Obadiah. This is Obadiah 1 and 3. It says, the pride of thine heart have deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground. And when you deal with Petra, when you deal with which is the land of the Edomites, you can see how those habitations were very, very high. And Petra was heavily known for their rock style architecture. And it was also coined as Rose City, and roses are what? Red City, because they had the red colored infrastructure. The rocks that they used had a red hue to it. And that's all synonymous for the color of the skin of the people that actually built those residences. And what was the symbol of all these different lands? What did they have in commonality? Greece, Rome, and Petra, the symbol of the eagle. That's why it tells you in the latter verses of Obadiah how basically they ascend as the eagle. All right, so you have different, because the scriptures ain't gonna say the white race of the Caucasians. In latter times they would be called white, they would be called Caucasians. All these terminological um, pieces of Esau came in latter history, and that's how they started to recreate history through different names. All right, because names bring about what? Confusion. All right, names can be you know you have like ominomus, which can be name predictions, and you have misnomers, which are misnames or misrepresentations of an actual name. And Esau plays on misnomers. He wants to change his identity, going back to the beginning with Cain. So they're gonna change their name. And I'm gonna go to this main point about the clefts of the rock. It says Jerome translates the word by illudere, the clefts, Septuagint, Vulgate, Cicerus. The word occurs in the parallel passages where it has the meaning of refuge of the rook. This may be Sela or Petra, and that word Petra means rock. It says the country inhabited by the Edomites lay on the eastern side of the Arabah and extended from the south end of the Dead Sea to the Hellenic Gulf. It was a region of mountains and valley, difficult and in many parts inaccessible from the west. Right, so they had those lands as inaccessibilities from their enemies, going back to Alexander and why he built his region also in the Caucasus, the Caspian Gates or the Caucasus Gates, so that it could be inaccessible from enemies, Gog and Magog. And that shows you how that the history of Gog, Magog, and Esau, that war has been brewing up for ages. So it says rock-hewn dwellings are found everywhere in those hills. The Edomites, when they expelled the aboriginal troglodytes, which the word troglodytes deals with the cavemen, and the aboriginal is really original. Deuteronomy 2:12, the aboriginal troglodytes were the Horites, with brothers going to it. And when you look up the word Horite, it means caveman or cave dweller. So they took those lands from those original cave dwellers and they became the cave dwellers. So it says, having adopted their habitations and excavated new ones on the same model throughout the whole district. Right, and that's true. And like I said, if brothers want to further look into it. A matter of fact, I'm gonna jump down to verse 4. It said, well, where it says verse 4. Verse 4, though they exalt thyself as the eagle, the Hebrew gives nest as the subject of both clauses. Thus, though thou exaltest and settest thy nest, speaks of the eagle making its nest in the highest rocks. The metaphor is found in Numbers 24:21, Habakkuk 2:9. Will I breathe thee down? Amos 9:3. The seizure of Petra by the Nabateans is the judgment referred in this part of the prophecy. The complete ruin is mentioned later. And the Nabateans were Arabs that actually compromised that land in latter times, which is true. That was the fall of Esau, but Esau still is dwelling around in these days. All right, they took their strongholds because the modern day land of Edom is America. All right, that's why, like I said, dealing with the symbol of the eagle, how they reincarnated their cities, and this is that same Petra style living with these uh, high built up buildings. So I just wanted to go into this and go into that text in the Quran, and brothers could basically give their commentary or anything of how they feel about the text, because it all links up with biblical prophecy. So I want to end it by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Shemi Awashai, Shemar Kakwadash, double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Shalom Akim.